Hello, Professor Williams. My name is Elizabeth Rubio, and I will be presenting my BA 480 Nonprofit Management Final on the Human Services Nonprofit Sector. To start, we will define the human services sector of the nonprofit organizations. So since the nonprofit sector serves a variety of needs globally and different species needs, it's divided into subsectors. So my chosen focus for the presentation is human services, which is a subsector field that often focuses on tending to and meeting human needs by providing prevention or remediating current issues related to human welfare. Such of these social assistance programs include physical and mental health care, counseling services, and food and shelter services, just to name a few. These nonprofits identify needs in the communities that they serve, and they work to address, prevent, and provide solutions to the issues being faced by the individuals. To start, we're going to go with a little bit of ancient history on the foundations and when we first see human services emerge. We can go all the way back to ancient civilizations such as Greece and Rome. Philosophers such as Aristotle were advocates for philanthropy work. Back in these civilizations and cultures, citizens would voluntarily come together and they would join forces to create communal efforts to help serve and support the people in their communities, in their villages that were less fortunate. They would try to help fund public works, and they would help encourage education opportunities, equal education opportunities for people, all from their own will. And these early forms of philanthropy helped establish a great foundation for the nonprofit organizations that we do see today. And as we know, Aristotle, Plato, great philosophers, great advocates for philanthropy. We have a quote from him saying, "To give away money is an easy matter and in any man's power, but to decide to whom to give it to and how large and when and for what purpose and how is neither in every man's power nor an easy matter." I think that really is reflective of the process of funding in nonprofit management and human services sector today. Moving down the timeline in the history of the human services, we can see in the United States early forms of nonprofit organizations as early as the American Revolution around 1765 to 1791, which was American Revolution. Throughout history, the human services sector has gone through a lot of trials and tribulations and has shown extreme resistance and resilience, while they witnessed a lot of changes in societal expectations and demands that were often influenced by war, diseases, shifts and changes in the economies, and often natural disasters that people were faced with. Furthering down on the timeline, we have the slides are backwards, so I'm going to go here first. We have progressions in philanthropy that were highly advocated by Presidents JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson. And right before the early 19th century, the human services sector was mainly made up of small agencies that dispersed and originated from the settlement house movement. They were not yet experiencing the benefits, such as legal and tax-related benefits that the human services sector benefit from today. So we've seen an evolution in the benefits and the support and how much these organizations reap from the work that they sow. We see governmental support starting to come in mid-20th century. So in the 1900s, as I said, JFK, Lyndon B. Johnson, also President Eisenhower was one of the first advocates and allies for the human services sector by starting to implement contracts that support the nonprofit sectors, providing government funding. And we have the Public Assistance Amendments of 1962 signed in by JFK. That was one of the most important shifts of public welfare provisions in the Social Security Act. offering state governments ample tools and training to help enhance welfare programs and increase their effectiveness. And very similarly, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed in the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, which established a variety of social programs and offered equal access to education, health, employment, and general welfare programs for Americans. Following these three presidents that really supported the human services sector, follows President Ronald Reagan, and then we see a lot of changes in government funding and support for the human services sector. President Ronald Reagan had a very conservative influence on social policy and donations for nonprofit organizations. So due to a lot of backlash as oil markets face crisis and a lot of financial fiscal challenges and political unease and discord, President Reagan decided that the responsibilities of funding for nonprofit and human services sector is going to be pushed back to the state and local agencies and no longer going to be supported by government funding. So we can see a 25% cut in human services federal spending, and that was once again given back to the state and local agencies to be responsible for funding. And some Americans thought that the government system that Lyndon B. Johnson, Eisenhower, and JFK had supported in offering funds and resources to human services, they believed that that was not a major concern of the government and that the priorities of the government should be reconsidered. So a little bit about the sector dynamics of the human services sector. Just in the United States, there are about 313,000 nonprofit human services organizations, approximately. Over 16,000 of these organizations have a focus on homelessness. Over 12,000 of the organizations are supporting households struggling with food scarcity and making ends meet to feed their children and themselves. And then about 31,000 of the organizations focus on mental and physical health care, crisis support, and substance abuse and recovery. And then from all of these organizations, and especially the 16,000 focusing on homelessness, over 550,000 individuals that were experiencing homelessness have been helped by these nonprofit services. And about 39 million people living underneath the poverty level are also being assisted by the human services sector. And here we can see that out of about 3.35 million tax-exempt organizations, about, as stated earlier, 313,000 are active human services organizations. And the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, there are about 17 of them that are often addressed by nonprofit organizations, and the human services sector covers 11 of them, addressing direct human welfare needs and concerns. The only 6 that are not addressed by the human services sector is industry, innovation, and infrastructure, climate action, life below water, responsible consumption and production, life on land, and partnership of the goals. Although some of those 6 do play into human welfare, indirectly, they're not considered direct influences to the human services sector and human welfare. As many businesses, profit and nonprofit, experience circumstances that are often out of their control, there are risks and liabilities that do arise in the human services sector, such as, unfortunately, a lot of sexual misconduct and abuse or harassment, either between patients, physicians, or co-workers. And in order for, and also vehicular liability risks, a lot of these companies use vehicle transportation to get clients to their doctor visits or to get doctors to the home visits. So in order for these companies to address and prevent these issues, Companies can put in proper insurance policies, background checks for physicians, making sure no one's a sexual offender of any kind, and just ensure that the company is always driving properly, safely, appropriately, and covered with the necessary insurance to avoid extreme risks and that can lead to setbacks to these nonprofit organizations that are doing great work. Other arising issues also include certain companies not being able to keep up with technological advances. That does put them back, and it does also add to their workload by adding paperwork, billing, scheduling, things that can be handled by artificial intelligence, as we have seen nowadays. And other issues such as ethical dilemmas, personal ethics being involved in how people relate to each other, what's ethical, what's not. A lot of those issues can be seen between staff and colleagues or organizations that human services may be partnered with, or even their clients. So it's very important for organizations to be well educated, for their employees to be educated on how to ethically deal with situations and certain individuals that may come across in conflict with them. Another arising issue, specifically in the human services department and nonprofit sector, is fee charging. So it's very common for nonprofits to offer services in exchange for a fee. And most often the revenues that they're bringing in creates earned income. And there are arguments that organizations have become dependent on fee revenue rather than governmental support or donations. So it kind of puts a commercial perspective on human services organizations that should be mission driven. And people argue that it changes the priority and the goals of the organizations that should not be very financially based, which even though they are, they need to make money to pay for their expenses and the work they're doing. But there are views in that people are too financially driven on earning an income rather than their mission in their philanthropy work. And this shift in the view of the human services being attributed to more finances is also attributed to the presence of neoliberal influences that transform the sector from the selfless perspective to like a more utilitarian or self-interested market. And here we have a graph depiction of a social service nonprofit sector, which is considered a subsector of the human services sector. Social services is just more focused on a certain individual. So a caseworker will take a certain individual and see what they need and help that individual, rather than coming from a community perspective of the individuals that make up a community. So we can see in the social service nonprofit sector, you have 20% of their revenues given by private donations or giving, 37% is government funded, and about 43% is fees and commercial. So that is the fee charging that was mentioned in the last two slides. And here's another stat on revenues of human services and their funding. In fiscal year 2021, there was over $121 million flowing into the human services sector from government resources, and 53.8% of them were federal, state, and local government funding. And then the other, just under half, 46.2% were from all other funding sources. The importance and significance of human services sector really does have a very strong impact in the countless communities we see in the country and the world. Human service organizations, they have vital roles to individuals and the families of the communities that they serve. There are so many different arrays of missions, but just to name a few, human services sector often focus on feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, offering job training and placement to people that may be struggling financially, and offering natural disaster relief and recovery. Many of these organizations have changed the lives of people for the better through the support, through the resources that they offer individuals, and by offering services such as physical and mental health care, food assistance, and education, as mentioned before. Local economies can be improved, quality of life can be improved, and this can create ripple effects, like a butterfly effect in communities, leading to higher quality of life, better feelings, and better chances of success for people. They also help reduce homelessness, hunger, and disease rates by ensuring basic care needs of physiological, psychological, and mental needs for anyone that is struggling, creating better opportunities and societal standards for the adults, the children currently, and also all the future generations to come. Woodrow Wilson was also a advocate for human services and philanthropy and dedication and volunteering of time. And he said, there is no higher religion than human service. To work for the common good is the greatest creed. Another component of human services and their mission is also addressing domestic violence as it being a human welfare need. So the Domestic Violence Resource Network is one of the leading organizations, and they inform, support, and strengthen domestic violence intervention and prevention efforts. And they often they're funded by the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and they encourage their member organizations to collaborate and promote effective strategies to help improve domestic violence issues at a national level. Some examples of DVRN member organizations include Battered Women's Justice Project, Criminal and Civil Justice Center, National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, and National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. Here we have a infographic based on Australia Housing and Urban Research Institute. In the year 2015 through 2016, over 100,000 people were in need of help from homelessness specialist services because they were specifically trying to leave a domestic or family violence situation. Out of all of those 105,000 people in need of help, 37.8% of them were directly affected by domestic violence. And out of those 37.8% of the 100,000, more than half were women 18 and older. So about 60% were women 18 and older. And 34% were children aged 17 or younger, which also doesn't give us the specificities of whether they were male or female. And about 6% were men 18 and over. So another important significance and role of the human sector in domestic violence is that they help address, prevent, and support victims of domestic violence and abuse under the human services sector. And these domestic violence centers, they help, and homeless shelters, they work together to offer refuge to assaulted individuals and help them look for a safe place to transition to or to live to often escape life-threatening situations. Many of these human services are very important to the communities and the states in which they live because they do offer safe refugee. They often save lives and ensure the well-being of individuals that may be struggling. And they often offer mental, medical, and fundamental help services that victims of domestic violence and abuse and trauma often need the most and sometimes cannot financially afford it in order to improve and continue on in life. So from the year 2013, from the year 2003 to 2013, from the year 2003 to 2013, out of all of the nonprofit sectors, human services sector made up the most percentage of all of the nonprofit sectors. So that's about that was about a 10-year decade period. This study is limited because it doesn't show anything past 2013, but we can see the big significance that the human services sector makes up from the nonprofit sector. Nowadays, with all the technological changes, demographic shifts, and changes in communal needs, the human sector has evolved and it is redesigning the way that they offer and deliver their services. Nowadays, technology is helping for-profit and nonprofit businesses and organizations utilize and benefit from artificial intelligence. This helps them automate their routine tasks and helps them in their data-driven decision making, and as well helps them in team collaboration, such as meetings through the internet or sharing documents. There's a lot of reading, a lot of paperwork filing in the human services sector, and also a lot of performance compliance tasks and administrative work. And through AI, the workload has been eliminated for these organizations that are hands-on, that do need extra time to sit with clients and have maybe face-to-face meetings with people. But it has eliminated some of the grunt work for employees to dedicate more time to clients. They have better organization in scheduling, billing, and report generating, and it's a little less tedious. And artificial intelligence has also proven to be capable of identifying trends in patients or clients of physicians or clinicians that are often that can be overlooked or unnoticed by human employers of human service organizations. And some of the trends that have come up over the years in the human services sector include, as mentioned before, artificial intelligence, also the impact of COVID-19 around 2019. It changed the world to bring in and embrace an integrated healthcare system, online meetings and everything, and also changing the perspective that serving the whole person is not very possible without health and human services integration. And also virtual learning for human services sectors that do offer educational services. So from COVID-19, our meetings were limited, and so a lot of these human sectors had to go online to offer their learning, and they really focus still on wanting to offer equality and accessibility to their services. So the use of technology has helped guide the human sector through the trends in these last few years. So I'm local to South Florida, so I thought it was appropriate to discuss local nonprofit human services organizations in my area. In South Florida, there are about 3,800 human services organizations across the Miami metro area. Over 1,500 of them are multi-service human service organizations and networks, so covering an array of human service and welfare needs. 415 of them are specific population driven, whether Hispanic, Black, Asian, and then about 339 youth services organizations tending specifically to the youth, and about 230 are family services driven. Together, these organizations in Miami alone have employed about 30,000 individuals, and they accumulate more than $3 billion in revenue every year. Here we can see those numbers of employees, how many of each organization, their revenues, and their according assets. Multi-service seems to be the most popular, covering a wide array of needs. And at the bottom, we have organizations supporting multiple human services organizations. So kind of like an output of an organization supporting other organizations that have the same mission. And here we have two statistics. I know it's a little blurry because I did export it in a lower quality. But on the top, we have the sizes of the human organizations in Miami, in the South Florida area, regarding their revenues. So most organizations, the majority are just bringing in under $250,000. And going down to the second graph, we see how many employees these organizations in the Miami area often have. So the majority of the organizations have zero paid employees, meaning they probably rely a lot on volunteers. And then just less than a handful of organizations have over 1,000 employees. So the middle range seems to be about 10 to 100, give or take, employees. Some of the local Miami Human Services organizations I have found upon doing my research include the Make-A-Wish Foundation of South Florida, focusing on helping strengthen and empower children that do face life-threatening medical conditions in their battle. Little Havana Activities and Nutrition Center, focusing on helping struggling and socially isolated seniors, providing social services to them, such as meetings, interactions with each other, maybe some health services, and seeing what each senior needs specifically. We have the Hispanic Unity of Florida, which empowers immigrants with their offerings of helping them with economic mobility, health and well-being services, aiding them in their citizenship journey, and also offering civic engagement. And lastly is a local homeless shelter, that the Chapman Partnership, that I have donated to and tried to work with one-on-one several times. And they offer housing, medical and mental health services, food, basic essentials, job search services. And something I found really interesting is they also offer dog kennels to individuals that are coming in for housing that may have dogs that they don't want to depart with. And I just think that's beautiful to go above and beyond like that. So another very credible nonprofit human services organization that also focuses on natural disaster relief is the Miami Foundation. As we have seen in the last several years, South Florida and even the Central Florida area, but mainly South Florida, has been struck by many hurricanes, as we can see. From 1900 to 2010, we just in about 100 years, the South Florida area has been struck, and that is outdated because in these last few years, we've been struck a lot of times too. About, let's say up to now is about probably 50 times we've come across a hurricane. So the Miami Foundation is really helpful in natural disaster situations because they often offer pre-impact support and financial grants to help relief efforts before hurricanes are often hit. So once they're hit, the community is not struggling and wondering why they are not having the things that they need post-impact. And they also invest in solutions to long-term and natural disaster recovery. And as we know, since South Florida is such a hot spot for hurricanes, especially in the summer season, this foundation does offer a lot of support in the natural disaster relief area. And that is a wrap to my presentation. I'm very thankful for the term and the information and the guidance to be learned. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I look forward to having another chance to share and work together again. Goodbye.